Welcome, and thank you for joining us for the second in a series of Cisco Trend Talks. Today we'll be focusing on the future of mobility in an application economy. In our last session, Beyond SDN to an Application Economy, we discussed how applications have become the oxygen of delivering business performance, results and profit. Today we'd like to continue that thread of a focus on applications, but looking at how mobility is enabling productivity by changing the way we interact with businesses and individuals around us. Whilst adoption and penetration of mobile technology varies across Europe, the Middle East, Africa and Russia, as do the challenges faced, there is an outstanding opportunity for businesses in all countries to capitalise on mobility. As a region, we compete with startups and new business models from across the globe. So more than ever, we have to innovate to keep pace. We've already seen how the rapid growth of smart devices and apps has dramatically changed our industry in a very short space of time. But only last week, new European Union research was issued that reinforces that applications have a huge ability to increase the profitability of the region, with mobility as probably the biggest disruptor this decade. For our region, it opens up opportunities for countries and businesses to innovate and become more productive and thus truly transform. Today, I am joined by customers and industry guests who will be discussing how mobile applications are shaping the future of business, enabling innovation and competitiveness. And I would like you, our audience, to submit any questions on Twitter using the hashtag Cisco Trend Talk. Before we go to perspectives from customers and Cisco colleagues, what we're going to do first is get an industry view. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome Chris Lewis, founder and principal analyst of Lewis Insight. So, Chris, thank you for joining us. And before we go to our customers, I would really appreciate getting your industry perspective. Mobility is many things to many people. How would you define it and the role of applications in this context? How do you see businesses today using mobile?
I think the definition of mobility, obviously the technical definition in terms of how we use wireless connectivity to both licensed and unlicensed spectrum to connect whatever devices to whatever applications and services around the world. The change in the industry really has been that the telecoms industry was very much connectivity oriented, connecting buildings, making sure that all those good old exchanges linked together. But as mobile services have emerged and as Wi-Fi has emerged as a suitable service for many things that we do, that definition of mobility, it includes everything that we do in our business lives, within the organisation, and increasingly connecting out not only to our people who are outside the organisation on the move, but also to our customers and to suppliers in the supply chain. It is the mobile device, the smart device, the tablet are the preferred devices for many people for what they do. It still coexists with the fixed side of the industry, but really it's starting to allow organisations, businesses to think much more openly about how do we make the business process work better rather than constraining it by the older technologies that we had perhaps under the fixed regime.
And do you see any trends in how businesses are adopting and using that mobility today?
Oh, certainly. I think whenever you talk to someone in charge of a business, the CIO or the increasingly the chief digital officer, the CDO, then we start to see that they're embracing it, not only from the point of view of a centralised structure in terms of how do you build mobility and mobile into the connectivity, but also from a line of business, because what you find is that because it's going down to that individual device in someone's hand, you're actually starting to embed it right into the process. So it's more to do with what the business is doing rather than perhaps the old organisational structure where it was a centralised function issued. And in fact, remember that when mobile first came in, it was pretty much loathed by the CIOs because it was a bill shock, it was unexpected, they didn't know how to deal with it. And now, with all the services emerging from the industry, we're starting to see much more control over it, and it's not restricting it, it's opening up more opportunities for the way that mobile can embed itself into organisation and business structures.
And are there specific changes in the industry that are driving that trend? Or?
We're in a continually changing, evolving industry, aren't we? And I think certainly the arrival of 4G is something which is changing it with its increased bandwidths, the increased capillarity of networks going down, combining with Wi-Fi, but now we're also looking at small cells getting down to take away the barrier of being previously just being outdoor, but now also looking at in-building connectivity as well. So those changes, the changing roles of the service providers in what services they're trying to get to their customers. But I think most importantly, the changing way in which businesses embrace this mobility concept and start to build it into their thinking about how they can improve the way they do business.
And taking that point, what needs to happen to truly realise the potential of mobility for businesses?
Well, I think if we take it in the broadest context, if the communications is there to support the business, then obviously it needs to be reliable. It needs to be appropriately wide bandwidth to carry all the video and all the content that we want to use today as part of all of our business processes. We need it to be at a reasonable cost, of course, and we talk about roaming charges across the region having been a major issue, has been addressed by the European Commission. But I think the network issue in terms of making sure that connectivity is there, whether it's licensed or unlicensed spectrum, so whether it's Wi-Fi or whether it comes across the licensed service provider network in a reliable format, and also thinking about extending it to the Internet of Things, that of course we will be connecting many, many more devices, many billions of devices in the future, that we need to make sure that's done at a reasonable cost, and the management behind it, the security of all the communication, the security of the information, and the management and reliability to make sure it all works end to end. And end-to-end means device to device, device to application, so everything gets properly supported throughout the organisation.
Chris, thank you. So on that note, really how end-to-end is required, I'd like to introduce Mansour Hanif, Director of Radio Access Networks at service provider EE. Mansour, EE were the first in the UK to introduce 4G and were already working with businesses to help them address the opportunity of mobile. But what are the real challenges that you're solving with your customers today?
Yeah, thanks very much. I spend a lot of time, as much as I can, speaking to our customers, especially our corporates. And the thing I hear most of all, I think the biggest challenge, and following on from what Chris said here, is that I think it's dawned on the whole of society, not just the business community, but the whole of society, that we live today in a mobile-centric world. And I think that's really sunk in. That's been, in the shadows for the last few years. Over the last 18 months, that has sunk in. So I think it's very clear we live in a mobile-centric world now. It's happened right now, and I think businesses are asking the question: how can they harness the energy that's coming through that mobile-centric world in a more efficient manner? The good news is that along with the change in mentality of realizing that we are in a mobile-centric world, and that perhaps in 5 or 10 years there will be no business that doesn't do business over mobile. The other thing is that the technologies are now there, and they're coming faster than anybody ever believed, that can allow businesses to harness the potential of the mobile-centric world. So 4G, for example, in the UK, nobody ever believed it would go so fast. So we're very pleased and very proud to have pushed the limits there. And I think now the challenge that our customers in the corporate world are asking us is, how can we best harness that? How can we increase our revenues through the potential of mobile? How can we secure and ensure that our revenues are kept where they're at risk through mobile? And how can we reduce our costs and be more efficient in the way we do our business? The other challenge I think that our customers are facing is obviously, as Chris has alluded to, data use is exploding, and it's going to continue to explode. And as we go into the Internet of Things, it's going to continue to do so in ways we haven't even imagined. So the challenges there, obviously there's a lot of fear out there. So what do we do about it? So I think Wi-Fi up till now was seen as the kind of stopgap which would solve everybody's needs in terms of having unlimited bandwidth. There's a realization that's not true. There's no unlicensed spectrum which can manage the needs of the users today and of the future. So I think there's the question they're asking us is, what is the solution? Is it multi-mode? Is it 4G? Is it 3G? Is it Wi-Fi? So we have a lot of answers to those questions which we are investing in today to answer the needs of our businesses. I don't think anybody believes today that Wi-Fi is the only solution. It is one of the solutions, but it's definitely not the only solution. The other challenge that the question we're being asked by our customers is security. So mobility, cloud go hand in hand together. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the other question is security. How can we make sure that whatever we do in mobility in the cloud, and Chris mentioned the fear that was put out with the reaction of the CFOs when mobile first came in, that's compounded now by the fear of being less secure and the risks associated with that. So obviously, we need to make sure that our customers understand we have the right solutions, they can trust in our network and our partners, and that today mobile and cloud can be secure as well.
So you've had good adoption, but what's the real potential within business for mobility?
I think the potential is pretty much limitless, as I said before, but I would highlight on a few key areas. The first one is, first of all, you referred to 4G, Chris, and I totally believe that 4G is the highway to the cloud. So in very simple terms, what comes down must go up. Up until now, the cloud never really took off because there wasn't a simple and efficient and easy to use way of getting your content and your business critical data up to the cloud. So 4G has provided that, because we don't talk about it too much, but I think the uplink, the upload potential of 4G is tremendous as a technology. There is no technology out there, fixed or wireless, apart from perhaps the very best fiber, which can allow the upload speeds as 4G does. Today we're getting 50 meg upload speeds in our network. That totally changes the way you use the network. And now it's much easier to take the content, put it straight up to the cloud, rather than going home, offloading it. That changes the whole way of the way our customers do their business. So cloud will become a reality thanks to 4G. That's the huge potential that's coming in now. So this is the moment when the cloud really becomes useful to businesses in a massive way, beyond the niche players of a while ago. The other thing is, mobility used to be considered only in terms of motorways and roads, etc., which are very important for corporate customers in particular, and we're investing hundreds of millions of pounds this year to improve the coverage on roads and railways. But beyond that, today, mobility now is about indoors and outdoors. Mobility is about, having a proper connectivity and solution and applications that can follow you from this room to the next room, or, into the boardroom and upstairs. And yes, it is a challenge to get the right levels of indoor coverage. We are facing those challenges by innovation, and we're wasting a lot of money on indoor solutions for 3G and 4G. But I think we have to look at the potential that gives as well, because the more indoor solutions we get in, there is a huge amount of added value we can provide to our customers. So geolocation indoors and outdoors. Imagine a shopping center, imagine huge offices, for example, where you can actually bring the content and have it follow around your customers. Imagine the potential of that for large corporate organizations is enormous, but also for shopping, for any type of service industry, for example, hotels. The potential is enormous to not only at a very basic level, have a huge amount of granularity in your geolocation information, indoors and outdoors. Number two, be able to provide tailored programmable content useful to your business much closer to your customers, wherever they are. And also to innovate and to provide new applications. So the third point I would say is the potential that we're only just scratching the surface now is we've talked about application, the future of applications in a mobile environment. For me, applications must move into the mobile network. So we've had a lot of debate over the last 10 years about OTT players, and I think that debate is now stale. It's finished, I think, because there's a realization now, because of the fact that we are now in a mobile-centric world, why would you go over the top of the mobile network? We want to convince all of the OTT players to use our network, because our network can provide value to them and to our business customers. So we need to make sure that people have access to that value. That's why we are very, very keen proponents of network APIs. And that's something that we've kicked off with our Tech City partnership. So we brought the highest speeds in the world to London this year with our last year now, with our 300 megabits LTE advanced. The first users of that kind of speed will be the developers in the Tech City area building new applications to harness those speeds, and we're going to allow them access to our network capabilities through our network APIs, so they can actually build the applications of the future which harness those speeds and give value to their customers. So I think we're only scratching the surface of that now, so the Tech City developers will be the first users of that. But imagine in an indoor environment, we can provide today an API to our network through the indoor cells, which is tailored to the customer. So for example, in a shopping center, it's not just about getting information to and from our business users. That's only scratching the surface. Imagine in a shopping center or in a gaming environment where you can actually allow in a controlled environment our business users to control the physical characteristics of the network indoors. So imagine, for example, you have a 4G femtocell here. We could allow you to control it and to increase your coverage indoors. These are the kind of things that are coming in the future.
So you've mentioned APIs, you've mentioned location, you've mentioned cloud and bandwidth and indoor-out coverage. Are there any particular trends that are causing your customers to change and adopt different mobile strategies?
Well, I think, the main trends, I've pretty much touched on them already in the past. So to sum them up, basically, the fact of the matter is that 4G is a complete game changer. It's been an evolution up to now. Now it's going to the revolution stage. So the trend is to harness the 4G capability for not just for connectivity, but added value. And I think the other trend is that we're being asked more and more for multi-mode solutions for indoor usage. So the request for Wi-Fi alone is in the past now. And our customers are more and more asking us, what can we do in a multi-mode way to give that flexibility? And the third thing is mobile, cloud, and security together with flexibility, using software-defined networks or NFV to allow large and small customers with a single platform through our network to be able to pick and choose exactly what level of centralization they want for their applications in the cloud, or what level they'd like to bring in-house and have brought closer to the edge of the network. So flexibility, cloud, mobility, and security are, let's say, the biggest trending items today.
Thank you. So I'd actually like to pose the same question to Gordon Thompson, who is Cisco's Director of Enterprise Networking for EMEA. And Gordon's going to be joining us over telepresence from Russia. So Gordon, when you engage with customers on the subject of mobility, what trends are you seeing?
Hi Scott, and delighted to join you all from Russia here in Moscow today. Scott, we're seeing three distinct trends or waves that our enterprise customers are looking at or are in, dependent on their vertical sector, dependent on their geographic location. And those trends are as follows. The first trend is really back to embracing mobile connectivity and dealing with security. So, in the past, many customers wanted to block mobile devices connecting to the network. We're now at a point where the majority of our enterprise customers are accepting mobile connectivity and are looking at the best ways to secure it. So, wave one for us is definitely customers embracing mobile connectivity and dealing with the security issues around mobile connectivity. And as one of our previous colleagues said, connecting to the cloud and things like that. Wave two is really about embracing the analytics and the user experience that we can provide to customers through Wi-Fi. And this, is being seen in terms of taking location analytics, detecting the user, and then engaging with the user. And we see this most typically in retail and places like that at the moment, but it's expanding across all vertical use cases. So the example is in a supermarket today where you have a loyalty card. The supermarket doesn't really understand what you're buying until you get to the checkout. It has no way of influencing you as you go up and down the aisles of the supermarket. Imagine through your mobile phone being able to detect you as you walk in the store, and there, as you walk up and down each aisle, being able to push content to you that is relevant for you and your consumption habits as you move up and down each aisle, and therefore influencing your buying decisions, because at the moment we can't influence somebody's buying decision until they check out. And this data then, we can start to use this data to then make different buying or business decisions as well. So the aisles that, for example, are most frequently used by our customers, we now have real data, and we can use that to make sure the manufacturers of the goods can, pay extra to have their goods on aisles that are most frequently used. I have one example of a coffee store who recently used location-based analytics of people passing by the front of their shop to decide actually what time in the morning they should open their shops. Traditionally, they opened the store at 6:30, and they didn't know whether to open at 6:30 or 7, and they were able to make a business decision by using location-based analytics on people passing by the store. So this second wave of Wi-Fi experiences, really a mobility experiences around the analytics and the data that we can get from location-based usage, and then engaging with the user in a different way. So being able to push messages down to them, for example, 10% off on these goods today. You get a barcode to your phone that allows you to use that at the point of sale to get additional discount. So really improving the user experience in analytics. And then the third wave is really coming through the higher performance, gigabit Wi-Fi that we're seeing coming through now, 802.11ac. And this is really much more around the video consumption that we can drive and push to people in terms of their use of the mobile device. Most commonly being used just now in sports stadiums, in terms of being able to push high quality video messages through to the user as they're watching a football match or at a sports arena. So the ability to then push this high definition video experience through to people is the third wave, where some people are starting to embrace that today, and some people will embrace it in the future. So three distinct waves, Scott: connectivity and security, analytics and user experience to make different and better business decisions, and then finally the immersive video experience that we want to push to everybody in the longer term.
Thank you, Gordon. And actually, that leads us perfectly on to our next guest, Rob Ray, Group Director of Digital and Information Technology for the FA Group, or Football Association. So, Rob, you're joining us today from the Football Association. That must be a very diverse environment. Can you give our audience a little bit of insight into your industry and the role mobility plays within it?
Certainly, Scott, thank you. So December 19th last year was 150 years since the first official game of football. And I think I would expect many of your customers, many of the people watching this today, have participated in some way or another in football at some point. I think perhaps technology is catching up with us. It's always been mobile. Football is social. And distributed from one end of the country to the other. It's global. This year, obviously, we've got the World Cup. It's a huge industry. For us as the Football Association, I'll break it down really into two areas: participation and the fan experience. And if I focus on participation to start with, so as I say, really it is about scope and scale. In any given week, we've got a couple of million people playing football. In any given month, around 7 million people will actually kick a ball. And we provided services, technology services that help administer, market, and promote and develop the game. In 2013, we had 15 million people use or access our services in this country. The kind of services that we deliver benefit from mobility. We've got things like league administration tools that are saving, well, we had a league write in, so not our numbers, saving 900 hours in a single season. There are 1,300 leagues. I'll let somebody else do the maths. A significant amount of time that can be saved. We want to achieve the same for clubs and teams. And that time saved in administration then we hope is converted into developing the game, our national game, our obsession in many respects. In terms of where we need to move to with mobility, we already provide a coaching app. We already provide a number of mobile sites that allow people to actually access services. But the reality is most of what we provide today is online, and we continue to add to that. But the reality is our customers, the participants, are sitting in a changing room on the side of a pitch. They're a coach, they're a referee, they're a volunteer. And really we need to put the technology in their hands where they're located. So we've got a lot more to do. There are some challenges in delivering that as well that perhaps some of our colleagues here can actually help deal with. Pitches are not typically, or football locations are not typically in a built-up area. They're on the edges of towns where we experience either poor coverage or decreasing bandwidth. So there's some real challenges in us being able to deliver something that can make a big difference to the hundreds of thousands of participants, millions of players in any given season. And then moving to the fan experience, we run Wembley Stadium. We host 35 plus events in any given season with 2 to 3 million people through our doors. It's the home of England as well. It's a real technical challenge in just delivering an event there. We have a huge amount. I would argue Wembley is one of the most technical or technically advanced stadia in the world. But we don't know a huge amount about our customers. They buy tickets, they buy food, hot dogs, beer, whatever they want. But we don't know a huge amount about our customers. And mobile communications is an opportunity for us to actually break down that barrier. We've invested over the last couple of years in adding a digital estate to the stadium, as have many other stadia for that matter. And the points that apply to Wembley apply, to any stadium. That digital estate, so 1,000 plus TVs, a facade for the front of the stadium that will launch this month, allows us to communicate to the fan. Mobile allows the fan to communicate back to us. It creates the feedback loop that really is essential to us actually discovering something about them. We hope, I go back to the point of fan experience, that it actually lifts their experience as well. So the kind of things that we already see people do, we have a great 3G and 4G network in the bowl. And we already see, and you'll have seen many pictures of this, LCD screens held up, not lighters or candles, held up during music events, football events, etc. And people are recording, capturing, and often sharing what's actually happening in the event. We want them to always be sharing, to be amplifying, to be magnifying the event, so that, well, actually, Wembley is the venue of legends. We want our fans, our customers, to put themselves at the centre of their network by sharing their experience. There's some real challenges to that.
So you're reaching out to your fan base and your customers in different ways through their mobile device. Is there any way the FA Group uses mobility in its wider sense that is solving different challenges for you?
Yes, I think. I think there are several things we are actually doing in terms of developing the game. So we've got 250 plus coaches, 2,000 staff, 50 odd locations around the country, and most of them, they're not in the office. They're out delivering skills sessions for kids at schools or in parks or wherever. And actually engaging with that audience using mobile technology is something that we are already doing and looking to expand on. So when you've got a group of 11-year-olds or 9-year-olds, showing them something on an iPad actually captures their expectation and their attention. So I think we're doing things like that, but then extending into other spheres of mobility. We use WebEx to bring together people for discipline hearings. We've been doing that for around 3 years, and that fast tracks the whole discipline process. We are now expanding that into coaching delivery or coaching communication. So coaches are mentored and developed And as we build up our network of coaching capability in the country, I think we'll see more of that. And also virtual learning environment or experiences. Whether it's online or on mobile, there are many things that we can actually deliver, rules of the game, basic safeguarding of children, medical skills, etc., that we can deliver that don't require a ball and a bib and a couple of cones. But of course, that's our principal goal, is people actually playing on the pitch. So yes, mobility plays a big role in the delivery of our goals.
So looking forward, looking into the future, what opportunities do you see for embracing mobility as the technology evolves over the next few years?
Well, I still think the technology's catching up with us a little, just in terms of meeting our needs. But I think if we look at the kind of spectrum of things, elite performance, so we can use mobile technologies to tackle those 1% differences. And it's certainly something that I've learned at my time with the Football Association involved in sport, that elite is a real challenge. So anything that can make a difference there, I think is worth exploring. Continuing to support the volunteer that actually administers the game, make it easier for them. And I think also in terms of the fan experience, it's mobile tickets, mobile payments. If we are able to improve the efficiency of delivery to the fan such that their experience is centred around what's happening on the pitch, rather than everything else is part of it. But mobile tickets allow us to know a little bit more about you. And at the end of the day, it's always, whether it's football or any other business, it's about getting to know your customer.
Well, thank you. So I'd like to give some questions actually to some of the other panellists on the sofa here with me. So Mansour, we're all catching up with football. How do you see the challenges and opportunities that Rob has outlined reflected in other vertical industries that you're touching?
It's a good question, but before we move away from football, just one request from me. Do you have an application for referees to make better decisions?
Not yet.
You don't need to answer that one. Yes. No, just coming back to vertical industries, yes, absolutely. There's a huge amount of verticals who are using mobility in different ways, but I'd say the ones that are more closer to Rob's situation, I would say, is, for example, the hotel industry. Where we've been approached by several hotel chains who are looking for the same type of added value from our network. For example, a hotel chain a few months ago told me, well, we have 5,000 employees in our hotels around the country, and in the morning we know they go and make the rooms. And these are massive hotels, 10-story hotels with thousands of rooms. Then they disappear, and we have no idea where they are for the rest of the day. And then at the check-in desk, people come into the check-in desk, and sometimes we have a queue and our customers have to wait. Now, if we could equip all of our employees with the right mobile devices and have the right technology in our hotels to be able to localize where they are and communicate with them, they could be multi-skilled. And therefore, when you have a peak of people coming into the reception, you could just ping the cleaning ladies and ask them to come down and help with the check-in. So that's the type of added value from geolocation with indoor applications, or for example being able to check a hotel room. Today you can, on some hotels you can pick a hotel room, but now in the future, well, not just now but very soon, you'll be able to book your 3G, 4G or Wi-Fi coverage in your hotel room, because people nowadays do not want to be without their mobile coverage. So the hotel industry for sure, also the entertainment industry, the general broadcasters, following on from what Rob said about video. Video obviously is a massive uptake, and I think a lot of companies are now using video for training over YouTube, and they want to have that available anywhere. So people who are in the construction industry, for example. But the biggest usages for video we have is in the broadcast industry. Not people like BBC, etc., and events. For example, Glastonbury, they used our 4G network to transmit on 4 screens simultaneously to the 150,000 people in Glastonbury. That was a world first. And I think beyond the video part, broadcast technologies over the network as a whole, which are very adapted to stadiums, for example, can be used for other things, like, for example, software upgrades. If you want to upgrade your whole estate of Microsoft, whatever, we can use broadcast technologies of the mobile network to make it more efficient and faster for people to do that. So beyond the video to the overall broadcast over networks, eMBMS is a technology we're using, for example. So yes, there's a lot of actual vertical industries who are similar to Rob. There's a lot of them who are different, but all of them are trying to do the same thing, just getting more added value to serve their customers out of the mobile network.
Thank you. So Chris, how do we see the industry scale to support the varying needs of businesses and really realise the opportunity of mobility?
Well, scaling is always an issue, of course, because the demand, as everyone's already described, is exploding from devices, from people, from businesses. But the scaling issue, the technology is there. We need to put more stuff. We need to get more capillarity, as I said, down to smaller cells, so the connectivity reaches to everybody wherever they are, whether they're in Mansour's hotel room or wherever they may be. So the scale is there. The management systems, I think, is something which in the past we've not really scaled very well. But funnily enough, the cloud actually gives us some advantage in that the telcos don't have to do all that themselves. There's much more opportunity in the way the supply chain evolves for the industry to have a lot of this in the shared data centres and so on. So I think the scaling is not so much of an issue. I think making sure the proposition is clear. And in some ways, talking about the customers, as both Mansour and Rob have said, in some ways we need to make the connectivity sort of invisible to the customer. What the customer wants is they want the FA app to work properly, or they want the hotel reservation to work properly. And I think as an industry, we really have to work towards that, almost taking a step back and saying, right, we are there to support the way in which people want to run their businesses and want to reach out to their customers. And, we all know that the only time we think about the telecoms bit is when it doesn't work. And so I think we need to think about that. How do we get that scale with the reliability, with the security that Mansour mentioned earlier as well? All of these issues wrap around to make sure that service is delivered in as high a quality as possible to wherever we are in our business or our personal lives.
So on that note, I'd like to look in a little more detail with Edwin Palvast, who is the lead for Cisco's service provider business in EMEA. So Edwin, thank you for joining us from Amsterdam. We've heard how EE are working with their customers to help them be more competitive with mobility. But how can service providers across EMEA ensure that they are able to support the needs of their business customers?
So thank you, Scott. All the application we just discussed, whether it's in the stadium, whether it's actually in shops, or whether it's at home, it's key that actually there is seamless mobility. Right? That's a key requirement. And with seamless mobility comes security, comes easy handoff, availability of the appropriate handsets, etc., that give that experience. And of course, there's a lot we can do with 4G technology, but also, as we heard in the stadiums, that's probably going to be augmented with Wi-Fi technologies and other technologies to make sure that actually we have the right experience for the people that drive it. So that's, I think, an important thing. The other thing is that we make sure that actually all the players, and this is where service providers bring it together, that actually all the players can actually be interconnected and be interconnected in the right way. And the other interesting thing, of course, is if you look at what Cisco's predicted on the VNI index, so where we actually believed in the coming 5 years the total traffic will grow by a factor of 11 on the mobile side. There's a couple of things that can be done to accommodate us. One is LTE. There's a technology innovation we can drive that will drive faster speeds probably and capacity by a factor of 2. But also indoor coverage is probably going to be the largest contributor to actually increasing that. And that means there has to be collaboration between enterprises, venues, public places, trains, buses, to actually make sure we are able to deliver that capability and do that with quality and end to end. So that's, Scott, why I think the operators play a key role.
Thank you, Edwin. So, firstly, Chris, do you have any comments on Edwin's observations? And then I'll come to yourself, Mansour and Rob.
I think the role of the service provider, I think Edwin just nailed it there in his last comment, that actually it's bringing together all of the possibilities, all the permutations, because enterprises and businesses have their own networks. In some ways they're reaching out as you put smaller and smaller cells into the business. In other ways, Mansour's network and other networks are reaching in from the outside, and then we have unlicensed spectrum somewhere in between. So it's about in many ways, I believe it's about hiding the technology from the customer and exposing all of the APIs from the network, but also the applications, and just making things run much more smoothly. So the data role that Gordon mentioned earlier in terms of the big data analytics, very important as behind the scenes to help the flow all the way through the value chain. So I think, yes, service providers have a very key role to play in it. Sometimes in front of house, sometimes behind the scenes. But it requires that technology to be much more, I guess, hidden, invisible to what the customer's trying to achieve.
Mansour, you mentioned in-building coverage, and so did Edwin. Any further highlights?
No, absolutely. I mean, in-building coverage is key. We actually have very good in-building coverage around the country. There are areas like the City of London in particular which are a big challenge because, number one, the huge amount of construction that has been going on over the last few years and is still going on. And secondly, I think there's a conflict between energy efficiency for materials and mobile coverage, and that's true for buildings, and that's true for cars and trains. Every new construction, every new car, every new train that's being built is being built with new materials which block radio signals, basically. That's the bottom line, because they also conserve energy. So the EU drive to energy efficiency is great, but it means that we have to innovate. So we are doing that. We are investing hundreds of millions of pounds every year to provide innovative solutions where we can get to where our customers need us in a much more flexible way, but at the same time provide added value. So certainly it has to be seamless, as Edwin said. We will never bring out any technology to our customers which isn't seamless, because that's what our whole business model is. It's about seamless mobility. So the reason why things take a bit of time finally to get to the market is because we do a lot of testing and a lot of trials and make sure that connectivity is seamless. So I really believe in the multi-mode solutions, but these solutions have to be seamless, not only the way the customer interacts, but the way we manage the traffic on those systems, and the way we can then provide the right analytics to our customers that they can use for their added value.
So Rob, this question's actually come in from Twitter, but I think it's a great one for this point, which is, how does the FA see your relationship with the mobile service provider?
I think it's an interesting question. If I look at Wembley first, so 90,000 people connected to something, the cloud, the internet, 4G, 3G, Wi-Fi. Probably at any point in time we'd like to set out a goal of 20 to 30,000. Bandwidth demand very, very significant. And I think there are two key points in there. Firstly, it must work. So we don't have the opportunity for our customers. Every event at Wembley is unique. So we don't have the opportunity for the customers to come back and be re-educated and to be told it will be better next time and so on. It must work. And secondly, that bandwidth challenge, we need access into the network in order to store content. We don't want to create latency where somebody actually goes out, all the way out to the cloud and all the way back in order to receive a piece of content that they saw 2 minutes ago. So fundamentally, access to the network, I think and it is very interesting to hear Mansour talk about APIs, because without that, and historically that's not been available, without that, we haven't got that access.
So we're now going to open up to questions from Twitter. And as a reminder, you can submit your questions to any of our guests using the hashtag Cisco Trend Talk. Now, some have been coming in as we've been talking. So firstly, a question for Chris. In your view, who owns the user? The app, the network, the device, the enterprise, or other?
That's a very good question, and I think in the past, certainly, a lot of the telecom industry would talk about customer ownership. But actually, if we are getting into a world with the digital economy where supply and demand really balances out in equilibrium, then the customer is in charge. And the customer is able to make choices, whether it be from one network to another or one app to another. And therefore, the power is very much, it was in the hands very much of the individual networks in the good old monopoly days. It was probably in the hands of the devices when we first started moving to smart devices. I would say it's been in the hands of the apps and may well be there today, but it's shifting between the apps and the customer now, and we are truly entering a customer-centric world. Hence all of the comments we've heard from both Mansour and Rob about getting to the customer, interacting with the customer. And so I don't think anyone owns the customer. I think the customer is what at the end of the day pays at the end of the value chain, and all the way back then the rest of the industry has to share whatever money flows through the system. But the customer is king, and I think that's something which is extremely important and will become even more evident as we move forward with the digital economy.
If I could
Sure.
add on to it, I totally agree with you, Chris, and I think the whole thing about who owns the customer has moved on, and the customer is obviously able to make an educated choice, and he can choose who should be my one-stop shop to make sure that we tie up all of the bits of connectivity, including the device, the network, the connectivity, etc. Who should be my one-stop shop for that? And certainly from the network perspective, we want to be that one-stop shop. A lot of it is about confidence and trust in your provider. We believe that our customers do trust us with their data. People are used to having their billing coming through with our networks. They may not have that with some web-based people, like, for example, WhatsApp. Happy to use WhatsApp, but you don't even know who they are. We have 700 shops where people can walk in every day and speak to somebody who's real, plus the customer service. So we definitely would like our customers to trust us and to have us handle the whole of the 360-degree connectivity for their mobile needs. But it's the customer's choice, absolutely.
But you're equally happy for the FA to provide the service which comes back to you. It's a channel strategy. I think that's what you've described, is saying, of course we want to work with the customers directly, but actually if the FA's interacting with that customer at a particular side, then we're happy to be behind it. And then, as Gordon said, all the data that we're gathering will help that relationship. You're helping Rob's relationship with the customer as well as your relationship. So.
Totally agree, and I actually was considering the FA as a customer in that context, but also they can be a partner for third-party customers.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a question coming, and it's actually aimed for you, Mansour, but I think for Rob as well, potentially, is over and above connectivity and obviously trust on billing. How can mobile operators really be relevant in the cloud world we're moving to?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've touched on a lot of those items already, but you can see that mobility is now a must-have, and there's a lot of layers on top of that, where our business customers in particular are asking who is the right partner to provide the end-to-end response to their needs. So especially for our corporate customers, we can provide end-to-end solutions which can, in the future be very flexible and dynamic in terms of how much applications they want to have localized in their own premises, and how much, through software-defined networks, we can work with them to provide an end-to-end package where they can choose exactly how much content they want in premises and how much they want in the cloud. So I think there's a lot of added value there. The other thing is analytics. So obviously we're very strident in the way we protect private data, and we will never release private individual data to the public domain. However, we are able to aggregate data in such a way that we can provide extremely useful analytics to our customers, and that's what there's a huge added value in that. That's just two of the items, but there's a range of other added value elements that we can provide to our customers, just beyond the connectivity, which is essential per se anyway.
So you mentioned security, and actually this is a question for Gordon, and data privacy as well. So how does Cisco or whoever is operating the network ensure the privacy of my data?
Hi, Scott. I think it comes down to the policies that you set. Data can be static, but data can also be in motion, and ultimately it comes down to the customer, the operator, or whoever to set the correct policies across the network to be able to set that level of protection. In the past, it's been difficult to define a holistic policy across the whole network. We haven't had the technology, so we've been defining policy in pockets, in buckets and areas, and been trying to join that together. And that has caused problems in terms of complexity, cost, and security challenges for our customers. But we're getting to a point now where you can provide holistic policy across the whole network between mobile and Wi-Fi. And ultimately that will allow us to provide the protection that our customers need and the protection that our customers should have across the network. So I think it comes down to policy, Scott.
Okay. So a question for Rob. What is your number one priority in mobility?
I'm not sure I have a single priority. I guess at a macro level, it's establishing the right partnerships. I think we've already illustrated that we're in an ongoing technology shift, and building on existing or future partnerships such that we can't innovate. We actually need to, or we can innovate, but we have a limited capacity to. So we need to collaborate. We need reliability. In terms of, at a more micro level, connecting with our volunteers, providing the services we have online in 2014, in 2015 on mobile, and at the stadium, being able to connect 30,000 people to extend, augment their experience of any of our events. I think that's a real technical and customer challenge.
Another question for telepresence and for Edwin. Edwin, do you see new types of service provider entering the mobility market in the region?
Scott, good question. So we definitely see it in a number of countries like the Netherlands. We actually have seen cable operators actually going after mobile licenses. And that's been something that's, they have not really effectuated it. They're offering kind of MVNO service, but they could do it. In the UK, for example, BT has acquired a license, so you would expect them to actually get into the market. So I think there's a number of players who are trying to do this, but they will probably, looking at the licenses they've acquired, try to do this only in building. And these licenses are not actually useful for outdoor usage. So my expectation is that you'll see niche players trying to play in an in-building game or allow for licensed spectrum to be used in buildings, potentially for enterprise-only usage. So that's what we see, and that's one point. On the other hand, as we discussed around services, now probably there's going to be a combination of Wi-Fi suppliers with potentially an MVNO status, also trying to get what also just highlighted, what Everything Everywhere is trying to do is to actually get that position of being a kind of trusted party. And you never know what Google's going to do or some of the other over-the-top players, but definitely in the US they seem to be trying to pre-position themselves. But if you look at Europe, it's probably going to be other alternative service providers trying to acquire indoor licenses.
Thanks, Edwin. So last question, and it's a big one. So Chris, one for you, I'm afraid. Who is going to win in this mobile-centric world?
I think the ultimate answer has to be the business, because the thought process of the way businesses have used technology and particularly communications in the past, I think has been very restrictive. And as we said earlier, we're beginning to see the opportunities both within the organisation, however geographically dispersed the organisation is, that we can get people better connected, better access to the applications that run the business, and then backstream to the suppliers and downstream to customers. I think businesses will just embrace this whole notion of mobility. And as we've been through all the different permutations of mobility, be it service provider, be it the devices, be it the network itself, that we're beginning to see, I guess we should call it the democratization of communications, because it really is available to everybody. And then add on top of that wave of Internet of Things, where in Rob's Stadium, I'm sure many sensors will collect information as well as the information coming off the mobile devices. So I see the customers winning. I think the challenge for the industry is how do we, as Gordon just mentioned, how do we secure it all? How do we manage it all? Because you've got a much more diverse platform now where, all the way from the devices at the edge of the network, with sensors as well, through the network, into the data center, because we have to think of the data center as part of the network and that extended digital infrastructure. So managing all of that is a massive challenge. It needs to be a trusted supplier, as Mansour referred to, and the businesses need to have faith that they will have the relevant applications available to them and managed in the way they want them managed, and perhaps not in the way that were managed in the past. So I think the businesses are the ones who will gain the most from all of these developments, and in fact, and we as customers of those businesses will also benefit enormously as well.
Okay, well, thank you to my guests on that note, and thank you very much to our audience for joining the second in a series of many trend talks to come. Let us know if you have any feedback and if you have any suggestions for future events. The next talk will be on the topic of cloud, so have a great rest of your day or evening, and goodbye.